Hey there, and welcome to this presentation, Toy Sourcing, the Next 10 Years, or subtitle, Why Nearly Everything We Know is Going to Change and What to Do About It. My name is Steve Rees and I'm going to be running you through this presentation today. Our company names are Kids Brand Insight and Toy Team India. If you'd like more information on those companies, please feel free to go to those URLs that tell you more about our work. Here's a bit more detail on that in the meantime. So I founded these companies. My name is Steve Rees, as I said. Previously worked for Hasbro and other companies. 20-year toy and game industry veteran. The perfect face for radio, as you'll see from that picture there. And we basically run a consultancy to toy companies around the world. We do general toy business consultancy, which can be anything from helping people sell, set up export distribution, through to sourcing, factory finding, and anything in between. So we've been helping toy companies to find alternative manufacturing sources since we started, really. And we've travelled all around the world looking at this, and we've got some good insights to share with you in this presentation. To date, we've delivered tens of millions of dollars in sales growth and or cost savings for toy companies around the world. And we introduced half of the world's biggest toy companies to Indian toy manufacturing in the last few years. Just for your reference, our total travel cost to investigate these alternative sourcing manufacturing hubs to date, in excess of 100,000. Hopefully we can use our experience from making all those journeys to save you money and time. Excuse me. So our vision is to save toy companies more than $100 million by 2030. We'd like to facilitate more than 30 clients to ensure they have production capacity mid to long term. And we aim to bring $1 billion of toy manufacturing to India, Vietnam and other locations by 2030. Actually, we're quite on track so far to achieve all three of these, which is something we take great pride in. And you'll see why as we go through this presentation. So to start with, let's take a step back. Let's do a strategic SWOT analysis of the toy industry right now. So SWOT, for those of you who don't know, stands for Strengths, Weaknesses, Opportunities and Threats. This is a standard strategic analysis tool. And starting with the strengths. So the good thing about the toy industry is we've got long-term established consumer demand. Consumers are unlikely to want to stop buying toys anytime soon. We have a broad distribution base for toys, although elements of that are obviously under threat. We have a huge product development capacity. We have strong established brand licenses and content factories, if you like, people who churn out lots of content, both companies and individuals nowadays. We also have the innate, what I describe as the innate worthiness of play with toys, so that gives us some long-term security as well. We also have a plethora of kind of long-term toy brands that are long established in the market, like the Monopolies of the world, Play-Doh, Barbie, Hot Wheels, which give us a really solid underpinned foundation to support the business on an ongoing basis. Clearly also China's role as an established, efficient manufacturing powerhouse with huge production capacity is a major strength, which obviously we're going to cover quite a lot in this presentation. Now, in terms of weaknesses, well, here's the thing. We need to constantly develop new products. This can be quite inefficient, and it gives us this constant churn of product development. And if we don't have that churn of product development, we can end up on a bit of a sales roller coaster, with sales up one year and sales down the next. We also have quite a seasonal business, which doesn't make cash flow all that easy. We have an over-reliance on some established ways of doing things and products and operational formulae and doing the same old thing the same old way. For the Western economies, we have a relatively low growth rate. I'm talking about low single digit in some cases. And perhaps the biggest weakness, you would say, we've got a massive lack of diversity of supply chain. So to this point in time, the vast majority of toy supply chain is in China and China alone. Opportunity-wise, well, we've got an opportunity to drive toy sales because parents increasingly are using toys to leverage their children off of screens. So increasingly toys are seen as an antidote to screen time. We've also got a chance to grow a broader licensing platform, so we're less reliant on fewer bigger license holders. We've got the chance to significantly grow sales in developing economies, especially China. China right now offers the chance for significant growth, and over the mid to long term, India will come on board with that as well, just based on the size of population and the rate of economic development. We also have an opportunity to save some money on manufacturing by moving some production out of China to countries where labour rates are lower. On the threat side, and some of these we really need to take seriously. I mean, obviously, right now at the time of recording, we're in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic. So that in itself is an immediate threat. That's going to cause some issues with retail. It's caused some issues with supply already. But trying to look kind of slightly more mid to long term, once this blows over, which inevitably it will, we've got potentially a consumer backlash to plastic usage because of environmental concerns. That could be a threat to the toy industry in the coming years. We've got the screen time addiction, which, whilst it might drive some purchases to parents, actually means that kids are spending less time playing with toys because they're still on the screens. So actual playtime is less. There's obviously some major ongoing changes to the retail environment driven by technology. Coronavirus is probably going to accelerate this. Physical retail is becoming increasingly difficult. I mean, it's virtually impossible at the time of recording, but aside from the coronavirus, it's a general threat, and this kind of threatens the shop window effect of physical retail, where consumers see products in stores and want them, but maybe buy them later somewhere else. And also, perhaps the biggest threat right now, which we've seen across the course of the last couple of months as this pandemic has rolled across the world, is a massive over-reliance on China's production capacity and expertise for toy manufacturing. So their economy is developing beyond the need or even the viability of this kind of low-end manufacturing employment that we've relied on for so long. So let's go from the kind of the strategic and the abstract to the specific. More times than not, most conversations we have with clients about sourcing are all around, can you save us money? Where are the cost savings? Basically people will often be happy with their existing supply, so unless you can show them, say, a 10 to 15% cost saving, they won't really even consider moving manufacturing a lot of the time. And do you know what, frankly, this is completely understandable, because manufacturing represents, about a third of turnover for most toy companies, give or take a bit, in either direction. So if you want to save money, you're obviously going to look at your highest cost area first. The thing is, though, there is something fundamental that comes before trying to save costs on manufacturing. And this is it. This is how you get sourcing right. Okay, capacity first, cost saving seconds. Ensuring, and I'm just going to reiterate some of these points because they're really big points. Ensuring that production capacity is available is the biggest risk factor that a toy company faces. So I'm just going to say that again. Ensuring production capacity is the biggest risk factor a toy company faces. Okay. This is a quote by myself here. I apologise for being so arrogant as to put my own comments in exclamation marks in speech bubbles. But basically, if you can't make them, you can't sell them. So before we worry about saving cost of manufacturing, we have to make sure we can actually manufacture in the first place. So if we can save 10% off cost, but we can only manufacture half the products we need, obviously we're still going to be down. So many of the people listening to this will be thinking, well, that's fine, but I don't have a capacity problem. Well, that might be the case right now today, but here's the thing. The reason why you don't have a capacity problem, or haven't traditionally had a capacity problem for toy manufacturing, is answerable in one word, which is China. China has been an absolute powerhouse of efficiency, capacity, experience, customer service, delivery, etc. in toy manufacturing for decades now. We haven't even had to think about capacity as a threat or a risk factor because China has ensured it was in complete abundance. Now, maybe we had to consider that more in the last few years because of the issue with tariffs, potentially between the US and China, maybe because coronavirus shut down some production for a while. But these things could happen anywhere. Generally speaking, we've not really had to seriously consider sourcing outside of China for decades for most products. China's done an amazing job for the toy industry in this regard. And here's the thing, let's take a look at where we've come from in order to understand where we might be going. So if we look on the left hand side here, pre-China. Okay, so I was at a presentation at the New York Toy Fair when one of the senior guys at Spin Master, who'd been around in the years before China dominated toy manufacturing, said exactly what our company's been saying for quite a while, which is, and any old timers in the industry will tell you, it wasn't as efficient in the past as it is today in terms of toy manufacturing. It was fragmented. You'd source from Japan, Taiwan, maybe Hong Kong itself. For North America, you might source from Haiti. For Europe, you might source from Spain. You might have some domestic production, but it was inefficient, because you couldn't kind of fill containers with shipments from multiple factories in one shipping hub or shipping port. But you kind of had to do it that way because there wasn't one solution to deliver the capacity that you needed, and that's just how it was. Kind of roll forward, China opened up. It rose as not just a toy manufacturing hub, but a global manufacturing hub for nearly everything. If you want to look at the process of how China opened up, there's an amazing book by Henry Kissinger on China. It's not a short read, but it's a fascinating read. Anyway, so China opened up, they adopted parts of capitalism, they deployed their huge labour pool, and at the time of this process beginning, their very cheap labour pool to low-end manufacturing for these $3, $4, even $2 items. Hong Kong grew as a sourcing and management hub because it was easier to trade from Hong Kong, which, when this whole process started, was not part of China in the way that it's becoming so, or has become so. And so China developed this great manufacturing capacity, and this led eventually to huge productivity and efficiency. Now, obviously, those people who were around originally had a massive kind of learning curve and lots of teething troubles, but over time this has become less and less. If you want to source anything in toy manufacturing that's been done before, if you had 30 miles or 50 kilometers, from Hong Kong inland over the border, you don't have to go very far and you will find anything that's ever been done in toys. So China has become a massively efficient manufacturing hub for toys. Here's the problem though. China dominates toy manufacturing still at this moment in time, with something in the region of, we estimate, 85% share of global toy manufacturing. And originally their advantage was low labour cost and large production capacity. The issue is that the cost advantage has diminished over time due to rising labour costs and other factors. Basically, China's economy has developed and it is fast moving deliberately and correctly towards much higher end manufacturing. Things you can automate, things with technology, making, instead of making the toy BMW, now when China's making the BMW, that's how the economy has moved. And the population needs that kind of higher end work to justify the wages that are now required because of the pace of economic development in China. The issue for the toy business is that it's something like 2/3 to 3/4 of toys every year are new. Let me just reiterate that. 2/3 to 3/4 of toys every year in the toy industry are new on shelf. So toy lines don't last long enough to justify automation, and many of them will always tend to remain manual. The production will be quite manual forever. So the thing is, there's a significant proportion of toy manufacturing that is going to have to leave China for lower labour costs elsewhere. It's just the nature of our industry and the manufacturing process combined with China's economic development. So if you look on the right hand side of the screen, China's toy manufacturing at this the point it was making this analysis in 2018 was roughly $35 to $40 billion, give or take. Our estimate is that within a decade from the time of recording, which is in 2020, that manufacturing figure is likely to be more in the vicinity of about 20 billion. So we're going to see nearly half of that manufacturing move elsewhere. And it's almost like an inevitability because of these factors here in terms of how China's economy has changed. But just to be really, really clear, we as a business are not even slightly anti-China. Okay, China is not leaving the toy business. No way is it leaving the toy business. In many ways, China is going to become more and more important for the global toy business as we go forward. And this slide will help me to explain why. If we look at this nice wheel graphic here, thank God for Smart Art. Thank you, PowerPoint. Number one, China will probably need to supply its own domestic demand. Why would you ship from anywhere else when you have such fantastic domestic production capability. And China's domestic demand is fast growing. Right now it's number 2 in the world. The reality is it's likely to become on a par with the USA in the next decade. And then we're going to have 2 markets which are far ahead of the rest of the world. Whereas in the past, kind of, it was like, if you got it right in the USA, did you really need the rest of the world? Going forward, it's probably going to be China and the USA. And, that's going to give us some fantastic opportunities in terms of selling our products into China. China's also going to keep, automated and high-tech toy manufacturing. So things with heavy robotics, with electronics, and also those kind of items that sell in huge quantities year on year on year. These kind of things don't rely on labour costs so much, and they can stay, and probably will stay, in China. The third thing that's happening, which is a clear trend in the market over the last 10 years, is a move from being OEM manufacturers to being brand owners. So let me explain this. Originally maybe you could run a factory in China on a 20% margin, manufacturing other people's products for them, and you had such cheap labour costs, that was no problem. And what's happened over time is maybe that's got less and less. Maybe it's 10%, maybe it's 5%. For some factories, maybe they're struggling to make anything viable, and they're just kind of breaking even to tread water. If you can step up and build your own brands and sell directly into the global markets, obviously then you can move from making other people's products for 5 to 10% margin to being your own brand for 30 to 40% margin. So that is also happening. So just to reiterate, China's importance to the global toy industry is only going to get bigger. It's just that the role is changing. So we're going from what we thought we knew, what we did know, which was China was a low-end manufacturing powerhouse, to it being a huge consumption powerhouse and keeping some of that high-tech and domestic production. And let's be really clear about this. This is great news for China's population, who, for decades have supported the global toy industry with hard labour. This is great for Chinese citizens. They're living a better quality of life. So we should really applaud this successful economic development. It's good for China. It's good for the rest of the world in terms of helping us to then have a bigger, stronger, higher end toy market to supply. Okay, so let's applaud that. Practically speaking, some stuff's going to stay in China. From our perspective as a company, we still work actively with a number of factories in China. We've got great relationships with them. We've got friends in them. We brought a lot of business to China. We're a big supporter of that. But, the reality is China is not going to remain the primary toy manufacturing hub for toys that it has done. There are going to be other things, other places rising to the fore. Just to reiterate at this point in the presentation, okay, forget everything else, right? Okay, right now, immediately, maybe a number 1 imminent business risk factor is the coronavirus and getting through the next few months without too much of a challenge. But if all goes as it seems to be headed, and we can get past this thing in a few months with medication, with a vaccine eventually, hopefully everyone gets through to Christmas, we have a normal Christmas, then things can return back to normal. Aside from that issue, your number 1 imminent business risk factor is ensuring capacity, because if you can't make them, you can't sell them. And in some ways, the coronavirus issue actually highlights how over-dependent we become on one manufacturing hub. But also, if you think there are some businesses in the West going to suffer because of the issues of this virus, those factories which are suffering on making 5% manufacturing margins are also probably going to suffer. These are becoming riskier places to place our manufacturing versus where they were in the past. So we have to accept this reality. Many toy factories in China have begun or will begin to struggle to deliver viable, sustainable, quotes, for labour-intensive toys on an OEM margin with rising labour costs. That's just reality. Here's the thing. If you imagine being the person who first discovered that the world was round, centuries ago when everybody else thought the world was flat, we've been working with alternative manufacturing sources for a long time now, and we've seen this coming. So we've been the people shouting that the world is round when others have said, no, the world's flat. Why do we need to change from China? It's all fine. The thing is, there comes a point where you can live in denial and say, yes, the earth's flat. But if it is round in reality, that is still reality, even if you don't believe it. Okay, this manufacturing transition is happening. In some markets it happened 10 or 15 years ago. Automotive, pharmaceutical, these guys all went through this change a long time ago. Okay, we're catching up. The toy industry is catching up. The reality is, things are not going to be as easy and as smooth going forward as they have been so far for the past decade or two. Okay, that is the harsh reality. Things are going to take more work, things are going to be harder, there's going to be more risks involved, but we need to deal with and manage that. You know, you can kind of ignore this transition and say, well, we've got a team in Hong Kong, we've got a team in China, we've got factories there we trust and they tell us they're fine. You know, it's just not the reality that we're going to be able to maintain things the way that they have been for the reasons that we've outlined. Here's the thing though, also don't think that it's easy going outside of China. It's not going to be, because these places don't have the same experience. They don't have the same depth of supply chain. They don't have the same working practices. A lot of them don't have the same size of workforce, although some do. You know, going outside of China is going to be more work. It's going to be more risk. It's going to be more resource intensive. It's potentially going to be more stressful, and there's going to be some screw ups along the way. This is reality. Sorry to be the people giving you the bad news, but that's just how it's going to be. Here's how we see the situation in 5 to 10 years, okay? We're going to move to this multi-hub manufacturing solution. Okay, so then we're going to go from being primarily this area here in China. Some of this is going to move to, quite a lot of this is already moved to Vietnam and is going to continue to move to Vietnam. We're going to see some stuff go to India. Quite a lot has already gone to India. Eastern Europe is going to come to the fore a bit more. There's a bit of stuff going on in North Africa. Brazil is kind of, South America has always kind of had some of its own production. And we're going to see some stuff come back to the USA. The thing is though, in the end, the majority of it is still going to stay in Asia because of low labour costs, and we've already looked at how important low labour costs are. Here's the thing though, don't take our word for this. This is not just our company saying this. This is all in the public domain. And if you haven't been able to see this in the public domain, then frankly you haven't been looking. Okay, let's look at some evidence here, some hard evidence that can't be disputed. Hasbro's CEO announced that China will only account for 50% of their production by the end of 2020. Let me say that again. Hasbro, one of the world's 3 biggest toy companies, consistently for the last 2 decades, announced that China will only account for 50% of its production by the end of 2020. And this is not just any old source, this is reported by the CEO to the stock market, okay? Here's a link, you can check that out. Spin Master's production in China in 2019 accounted for 65% of their total manufacturing. In 2020, it's due to account for just half, okay? So it's come down significantly. And again, this is not just us making this up, this is the Chief Operating Officer reporting this to the public and to the stock market. Hasbro's vendor list is published on their CSR website, their corporate social responsibility website, and this is all in the public domain. Hasbro's vendors in China in 2018, they had 48, and non-China vendors in 2018 was 40. So nearly, not quite, but nearly half Hasbro's vendors in 2018 were outside of China. Now obviously, that doesn't mean that each vendor manufactures the same amount of product. I suspect some of these long-term vendors in China are manufacturing significantly more than some of the other guys. But there is a huge reality here that there is a world outside of China for these big toy companies. And if you're in any doubt, this is an image we just lifted off the internet. This is in the public domain. This is a company that Hasbro have called Hasbro India, Sourcing and Operations LLP in India. So if you were in any doubt as to whether there was any reality for production moving outside of China, please take this as evidence. And here's the thing, okay? If you have $100,000 or even $1 million, even $5 million of manufacturing, you can move that tomorrow, okay? If you phone our company and said, hey, move this $5 million manufacturing for me somewhere, we could do that for you tomorrow, not a problem. But if you're like one of these big guys who has hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars of manufacturing to move, you can't do it quickly. You have to do it strategically, and you have to do it ahead of when you actually imperatively need it to have happened. Okay, so these guys have been working on this for a long time in order to make this happen. So here's some hard evidence, like I say. You know, if in any doubt, please feel free to follow these links. Even just search these topics and you'll find online that this is happening, and it has happened and has been happening for years now. So here's the point. How do you manage these changes? Okay, this is a bit facetious, but option A we're going to call the flat earth option. Do nothing, stick with the same suppliers, react late to the next virus, the next terror standoff, the next labour cost inflation issue. Saw some increasingly under pressure, sometimes desperate suppliers in China who are giving cheap quotes to stay in business because they've got empty factories sometimes now, or Inevitably though, the risk is the longer you stick with that past the point that it's viable for them, your tooling's going to get locked away. They're going to go out of business and leave you in limbo without production to service your customers at the peak points of the year. They won't necessarily go bust when it's quiet or at the best time. It's getting riskier and riskier. Maybe you can let your competitors save money and future-proof their businesses whilst you sit by and watch, and then you can panic and try and get some capacity in some of these places and kind of get everyone else's crumbs at the end. That's to us the non-strategic option. It's also, in some ways, it's the easy option, but it doesn't mean it's the best option, because at some point in time that easy option is going to run out. Okay, option B is what we call the round earth option. So this is, start a strategic realignment of your sourcing function, run some pilots, 1 or 2 products at a time in some other countries, take the learning curve that's going to come in that, both for you and for your suppliers, deal with the problems you encounter and learn from them. Then you ensure you've got some options when you want to ramp up capacity, should you need to in a hurry. You've got alternatives. Let's say the virus comes back, and I'm not saying it will do, of course, but let's say it comes back and hits China or hits somewhere else. If you have multiple places you can source from, you have more security. You wouldn't lightly let one customer or one product account for your entire business. So why would you do that with sourcing? It doesn't make any sense. And you can also recruit outside expert help like our company to reduce the learning curve and to save you costly mistakes, and also to fast track your process. Here's some of the challenges you're going to face though if and when you come to address this issue. Firstly, you're going to find some inefficiencies in the supply chain, in the logistics, in the customer service approach, in the way of working. You're going to have new supplier relationship learning curves. If you go and find a new supplier in China today, you still have this problem. So every new factory comes with this. Maybe you'll get some decreases in quality. Maybe you'll need to put people in the factories. Maybe you'll need to put more people in the factories than you currently do. Maybe you'll need to inspect every single shipment. You are going to need to take some steps, and there are some risks, and it is not going to be an easy ready to go option. Sometimes there will be work involved. Maybe some of these places will also have political instability or natural disasters. Maybe you'll have some shipping issues. Some of these places will have fewer sailings versus China. Maybe the per container cost might be higher, and maybe you can't find some product categories out there yet, and you're going to have to trailblaze and find some people who can adapt to what you need, and that's not an easy process. So here's the thing, this is not going to be easier necessarily, okay, especially at the start. But nevertheless, generally speaking, the opinion is this is going to need to be done one way or another. There are some opportunities and benefits you're going to find. Okay, you should be able to find cost savings in doing this, running through this exercise. Absolutely, you should. You should definitely be able to diversify your supply chain risk. In some cases, depending on where you ship to, you'll get shorter shipping times. In some places, it'll be longer. You should get some cash flow savings if you've got shorter shipping times. You're going to see increases in quality on in some instances, on some components, on some types of products. And overall, though, you are going to have a greater capacity to produce your products. So, aside from the general situation, I guess, here's the pitch from our company, I guess. How can we help? Well, our primary service is to offer consultancy for alternative toy manufacturing sources beyond, and sometimes where it's appropriate in China. We still work in China, and we'll be happy to continue to do so with companies where it makes sense for our clients. We can work at strategic board level to run costing exercises at board level, to look at strategy, through to really hands-on help to find new factories, to run quotations, to set up the suppliers, to do forms, to run pilots. And overall, we can help you to reduce the risks, to highlight the opportunities, to get the learning curve down and save money. And we know this, by the way, we know we can save money because we've done it before, time after time after time. How it works. Okay, so here's the thing. In 3 months is a typical kind of startup project. We can give you a full overview of the options, which countries, which regions, the pros and cons. We can introduce reliable factories and suppliers. We can run a quotation process, and we can go through to visiting some of the factories, arranging those visits with you or chaperoning your teams on those visits. Here's our costs. We're very transparent about this. This is billed in GBP as British pounds because we're based in the UK. We bill £3,500 per month, 30-month rolling term. If you want to do a month, we'll do a month. If you want to do 12 months, we can do 12 months, as long as we have 30 days notice. On a 3-month term, typical spend would be £10,500. if you compare that to your entire manufacturing spend, how hard is it going to be for us really to justify that based on saving 5% on your cost of goods, manufacturing costs? If you send your staff on business class flights to India and Vietnam for 3 staff, excuse me, what's the cost of that? Our travel bill across new locations is definitely in 6 figures. Why wouldn't you learn from what we've learned and let us save you a whole load of travel and stress, and just go to the people who have the right kind of capacity, the right kind of skills. We can help you find those. And in the end, though, the question is actually more importantly, what will the cost be if you can't manufacture your products and therefore you can't sell them? Your entire business is on the line at that point in time. So let's just take a look in a bit more depth at that. Can we save you money? So work out, as an exercise, what is 5% of your total manufacturing spend? Easy maths. If you spend $1 million, it's $50,000. If you spend 10 million, it's $500,000, etc. If we can save you 5%, which is an amount we have easily saved for multiple clients, would that justify our fees? Okay, if the answer is yes, please feel free to get in touch. We can probably help you. The likelihood is all toy companies will need to run this in the future unless they have their own manufacturing. So why not do it with experts who've already been there and done it for other people? You can profit from the learnings we've made from years of doing this. Here's the areas of expertise we have between Kids Brand Insight and Toy Team India. Geographies we look at, obviously India, travelled extensively in India. We know most of the, excuse me, well actually we know nearly all the export level manufacturers there. Vietnam, we've got some great contacts with some of the companies over there. Eastern Europe, if you want to look at other Asian countries, we can help you with geographies, functions. If you want to just find the factories, we can help you. If you want to run quoting process, we can do that. Price negotiation. One of my experiences is working really closely with factories, is that oftentimes people will get a quote and say that's too high and then not really engage further. I mean, that's a classic mistake. The more you engage, the lower your price will be, but also the more sustainable it will be. So on the negotiation side, we absolutely can definitely help to save people lots of money. If you want to run audits, if you want to check certification, we can do that. Our approach is actually not technically based, because there's plenty of that technical resource out there. It's research based. We want to find the suppliers first who are likely to be able to step up, and then build relationships with them over time, validate what they're doing, who they're supplying. We take a warts and all approach. Okay, we're doing everything we can to deal in reality, not in spin. If there's shortcomings or risks, we'll try and highlight them as much as we possibly can. We focus first on proven suppliers, and we'll outline their track record to you at all times. Sometimes if you need to do something different, there might not be a proven supplier, so we can go on that journey with you. But first and foremost, we would try and give you a kind of a already proven solution. Deliverables, new factory relationships, quotes, audit certificates, factory visits and tours. If we travel with you or for you, we'll rebill at cost with your price sign-off. The only challenge we face is our own capacity. So here's the perfect face for radio. That's myself. I'm the primary resource on each project. We have some admin resources, which is great. We love them and value them, but really what gives us our point of difference is you get senior level people, i.e. myself, delivering anything from board level insights down to like really practical nitty gritty details. So the reality is though that's limited capacity. We can do this with no more than 3 clients at any one time, because then we can't really put the time in, we can't manage relationships with the vendors effectively, and we can't do our own due diligence on your behalf. With the outlook for sourcing outside of China, frankly, our services are in demand. Okay, you would expect someone to say this to try and whip up demand, but really right now we don't really need to. We're quite full. So please do let us know as early in advance if you think you're going to need our help, and let's book it in. Okay. Next steps, if you want to email us some details and some questions, please do. There's the email address to send it to. That's opened by myself directly. More information on our company websites, www.toyteamindia.com or www.kidsbrandinsight.com/services. Also on there are some sign up pop-ups for newsletters. So if you just go onto those websites, you can sign up for our newsletters and get information about the industry and about what's happening and about our services. we're here for the long run. Maybe this makes sense for you now, maybe in 12 months' time, maybe in 5 years. Please bear us in mind. And like I say, if you want to sign up or if you want to ask any questions, please get in touch via this email address here. Also, if you'd like us to cover any other topics or to go into more depth, please feel free to ask. Where it's a professional service, we might need to discuss doing that on a consultancy basis, but we're here to help. So thanks for listening. I've been Steve Reese. Good luck with your sourcing efforts and trading ongoing. And that was toy sourcing the next 10 years. And most importantly, why everything's going to change and what you can do about it.